Welcome to another exciting episode of FEMCAST. I'm your host, Ilina Pejoska Zaturoski, and today we have a special guest joining us, Stefani Taskova Miteva. Stefani was born in Melbourne, but her family roots are from Veles. She has a master's degree in international relations from Monash University and currently wears multiple hats in her life, balancing a career, volunteering, and the joys and challenges of motherhood. In this episode, we'll delve into the dynamic world of working mothers, exploring the intricate balance Stefani has struck between her professional life and raising her daughter. We'll discuss the unique challenges faced by mothers in the modern world, how parenting approaches have evolved compared to previous generations, and the relentless pursuit of being the perfect mom while sustaining a thriving career. But that's not all. Stefani also brings her rich Macedonian heritage into the mix, and we'll explore what it means to be a part of the Macedonian diaspora in Australia, her involvement with the United Macedonian diaspora, and her experiences visiting her ancestral homeland. Stefani, welcome to FEMCAST.
Hi, Ilina. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm glad you're here with me today. Thank you so much for agreeing to be my guest. So let's start. Stefani, recently you returned from maternity leave after having your first child and jumped back into your career, working for an international consultancy based out of Melbourne as a client manager. Can you give us an insight as to how you balance your career with being a mother?
First of all, thank you for having me and for creating a wonderful platform for women. After a year of being on maternity leave, I decided it was time to go back to work, and I knew balancing my career and continuing to grow and learn in that space, whilst now being a mother, would be challenging. I mean, I've never done this before. I decided in order to try and still spend as much time as I can with my daughter and working part-time would ultimately be the best option for me and my family. So I try and balance my work and motherhood by dedicating my time and days to certain priorities. For example, I work from Monday to Wednesday and typically aim to be home by 6 p.m. the latest. So I have the evening with my daughter and my family. Sundays, we try and make solely family days, and we do swimming with my daughter in the morning, which actually means I make my husband jump in the pool whilst I have a peaceful coffee, enjoying their lesson on the sidelines. But these are also my recharge days where we try and get out and about as much as we can as a family and do something different and enjoyable that gets you out of your day-to-day routine. But setting boundaries, I think, and asking for help when I need it, really helps me find that balance. I also think finding this balance is sometimes more challenging when your children are so young and really rely on you. It's different when they're in school and also start to set their own routine and priorities as they get older.
Yes, but thank God for husbands, right?
Exactly. What would we do without them?
Husbands and great dads.
Exactly.
So what are some of the challenges you've faced as a working mother in today's fast-paced world?
I think there's so many, but mum guilt, feeling like there's not enough time to do everything, and a lack of sleep are definitely some of the biggest challenges for me. So, for example, feeling guilty that I'm not spending enough time with my daughter and my family because I'm trying to not just financially contribute, but also I'm wanting to pursue a career. Or leaving a work meeting, for example, because I'd have to take my daughter when she's been sick to a doctor's appointment. And this constant feeling like there just is not enough hours in the day to meet everyone's needs and achieve all these tasks, both at home and at work. And then there's a constant self-doubt that comes with that. You know, have I done enough? Will my daughter feel alone if I'm not there? What will they say if I have to step out again because she's sick? I mean, it's just never ending. Lack of sleep has, like I said, has also been a big challenge. And there's actually been some studies on this that I've come across that state that new parents, and in particular mothers, are sleep deprived for up to 6 years after the birth of their first child. We lose at least 3 hours of sleep within the first year, whilst others state that working mothers suffer the most sleep deprivation. And we know that sleep is important because it helps us in terms of balancing our energy and emotions, but also in being switched on and creative at work. You need sleep in order to even function properly and care for your young ones. So running on 3 hours of sleep sometimes has definitely been a challenge for me. But I think this isn't just about the challenges of working mums. I think stay-at-home mums also struggle in today's fast-paced world. And we need to remember that raising children, child rearing, and unpaid labour and care work, although is ultimately unpaid and not counted in national GDP, it nonetheless contributes to countries' GDP. So in Australia, for example, it's been estimated to be around 50.6% at times. So despite whether we're working or we're at home, I think us as women and mothers, we face a number of challenges, and it's important to give women the right support.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, mom guilt is something that every mom struggles with. I don't actually know a mom who hasn't struggled with mom guilt. Whether it's about going back to work or thinking they're not a good enough mom, or maybe, I don't know, that they're not spending enough time with their children because of something else, but everyone struggles with that. And I think that when a child comes to this world, everyone immediately forgets about the mother and focuses only on the child, and the mother actually feels isolated and maybe not even supported. And we know how hard those first weeks after the child is born are, because of the hormonal changes and the new reality, especially if it's a first child. So I do not have a second child yet. I do not actually know the feeling of how would it be if we ever have a second child. But if we do, I feel like it's going to be so much easier for me as a mom, because I'm ready and I know what's coming, and I will not be as hard on myself as I was the first time around, because I think that we are actually the ones who are most hard on ourselves, the moms. So what's your thought on that?
100%, I completely agree. I think first-time mums are just, and mums in general, sometimes are like a forgotten species, or, I think even when we're surrounded by so many people, whether it's your partner or, other kids, or your parents or your in-laws and friends and family who, love and care for you, you still can sometimes feel so alone in motherhood, especially at the very start, like you said. And I think, that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. In some countries, I feel like, such as Australia, some women don't have that village. So they don't have that, strong support system that perhaps other cultures do, or perhaps that, we traditionally used to have a lot in Macedonia. So times have changed, but it's still very critical and important to keep supporting mothers.
Yeah, definitely. Regarding the village comment, well, I think that in Macedonia we have all the help, but still times have changed, and many people have moved out of their cities and moved to Skopje, perhaps, and they do not have as much help as they expected to be if they stayed in their hometown, for example. But yeah, definitely, I totally understand what you mean. And this takes us actually to the next question. Could you share some insights on the different parenting approaches today compared to those of previous generations? And what is your experience with that?
I think, generally speaking, parents are more mindful of how they spend their time caring for and interacting with their children today. And I think there's definitely been a shift at what role the dad plays in that. So traditionally speaking, and not to say that this still isn't happening today, it is, but raising children has primarily been seen as the role of the mother. Now I think we are seeing more and more of that load being actively shared, and for various reasons. But I think it's important to also point out different cultures and societies have different approaches. And this also can change generationally. For example, I remember my baba and even my mother-in-law saying when we had our babies, it was only the women feeding, changing nappies, etc. So when they see my husband helping out, it's like, wow, I wish we had that help and support. And even the nurses, when my daughter was born last year, because I was recovering and I physically couldn't get out of bed, she came in and she said to my husband, let me teach you how to change her nappy. It wasn't, would you like me to teach you? She wasn't asking him whether he wanted to know how. It was, no, let me show you, and you're going to do it because your wife can't move. I think also, as things change in society and medicine, for example, our parenting approaches also adapt and change naturally. So we've all heard the term, let the baby cry it out. And it's something the older generation perhaps often used because the baby would eventually fall asleep or self-soothe. I think now we're hearing some experts say that this is actually a form of need neglect, and that letting your baby cry it out as a means of getting them to fall asleep, they actually end up falling asleep because their brain just shuts down from the stress. And I mean, there's been changes in when and how to introduce solids, for example, and this also impacts the way that today's generation of parents, I think, differ from those of the past. And I mean, there's so many more examples we could go over, like gentle parenting versus authoritative parenting. But I think importantly, we need to perhaps consider that as society evolves and changes, our parenting approaches do as well. And that's probably because there's changes in societal norms and influences, cultural shifts, and increased multiculturalism. There's the whole thing with, the younger generations, technology and the impact, what role sort of technology plays in, children's lives as well, which is an important one. Ultimately, though, I think we as mothers know what parenting approach is best for our child. And, something I say to a lot of people out there now after, my experience as a first-time mum is please kindly refrain from unsolicited advice on our parenting approach.
Yeah, definitely. Because we do get a lot of unsolicited advice, and I do not feel even a little bit ashamed that when I tell people I do not need your advice. If I needed it, I would have asked for it.
Exactly. Unfortunately, perhaps some people don't quite understand that, but
No. Believe me, they do not. And it's mostly from the older generations, but I actually noticed that some of our peers actually sometimes feel like they can give us advice which is unsolicited or advice that we didn't ask for. And I've been in situations like that, and I know other moms who've been in situations like that. And if it's moms who are younger, so I'm 32, and I feel like I've reached that age where I do not care what anyone thinks of me, or if I tell them I don't want your advice, I don't care if they'll get insulted because I said that to them. But I know younger moms who are like 24 or 25, and if someone who is or older than them, like not much older, in their 30s, and gives them unsolicited advice, they have not responded in that way as I'd respond, probably because they feel intimidated by that person. Older person is saying or what advice is giving regarding some topic, and I don't think that I should be respectful always of, or maybe agree always with what they're saying. So
yeah, I think I completely agree with you. I think it's nice sometimes that they want to help you, but there's also certain boundaries, and it's not just about respecting their age. It's you also feeling respected, and you being made to feel comfortable in your journey through motherhood. And sometimes I think, especially first-time mums and younger mums, they also might feel hurt by some of that advice, because it makes them feel like, yes, it is unsolicited advice, but it makes them feel as if they can't mother, or they're not the mother to their own child, and it creates this very, I think, uncomfortable dynamic for those women.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it makes them feel mom guilt. We're going back to the first question. So
yeah, exactly.
It definitely makes them like less of a mom, or like they're doing something wrong if they're receiving this unsolicited advice. And you mentioned about the solids and other stuff, which was done differently in the past. And I think that we've all had those challenges. So what I'm interested in is, have any of your Australian friends have experienced that? Like, is it a Macedonian thing only, or is it a world thing? What do you think?
Yeah, it's very interesting. First of all, sort of in terms of understanding it from my point of view in how, in the Australian context, I think in terms of the culture, when a baby is born, it's not everyone like in the Macedonian culture coming over and wanting to meet the baby straight away and, hugging it and kissing it and whatnot. What I've noticed with a lot of my Australian friends is that they'll create the space for the mother and the child to grow into this new routine. And it's not just coming over to, meet the baby. It's a lot of them will come over and say, you know what, I'm going to take the baby for an hour or however long you need. You go and you shower, or you go and you have a proper meal. So I feel like in that sense, culturally, it's a bit different.
Previously, when we were kids, they were not giving us solids like right away. We were just eating, food that was not solid. So for a very long period of time. And nowadays, we are teaching kids baby-led weaning, so they can eat more diverse stuff. And when we were kids, and even now, our parents, maybe you've noticed, they do not really accept that. They are stressed out when a baby gags, or they don't feel comfortable letting them eat on their own. I mean, I've seen that.
I think, it's so what obviously you're doing with your child and what the teachers are doing in daycare with your child, it's very similar to what is also taught here in the Australian context. And it's something that your maternal health care nurse, which is just a nurse out in your community that, sees your child every 3, 6, 12, and so, however many months it is, they also teach the same thing. And it's baby-led weaning. It's you understanding that your child will potentially gag and it may choke, but it's also preparing you, saying that, hey, you need to get your first aid course completed. You need to be ready in case this does happen, so that you know how to respond and react in a safe manner for your child. But yes, it's not, giving them food at 4 months like they used to previously. It's recommended here you start at 6 months, and you start introducing certain foods at certain times. So you start with the foods that can cause allergic reactions, and you offer the foods at a certain time during the day. You'd offer it in the morning. You don't offer it at night in case they do have an allergic reaction. And these are the things that I think we're now being taught, that perhaps the older generation and within the Macedonian context, this stuff didn't really exist. Like even when we've been to Macedonia and talking to like my mother-in-law there, for example, it's very different. I'll say, hey, no, don't feed her that. We're going to feed her this. And it's like, oh no, but she should try this. And it's like, no, I'm actually not offering her sugar until, a certain months, because that's what's recommended here. And, sometimes you'll cop the comment, oh, don't listen to everything that your nurses or doctors say. And I think it goes back to what we were saying before in terms of the parenting. It's my parenting approach. I'll sort of listen to, I think, I'll listen to the advice that I think is suitable to me and my child, and I'll go with that.
Yeah, so it's a generational thing, because we all face these same issues. So I believe that each generation should be better than the one before. So, and that is how I'm raising my child. I'm actually going to raise him one day to be better than me. And I expect him to be better than me, whether it's by being a better parent, or being better financially, or accomplishing his goals. So that's what we should all be striving for. Regarding what you said about the doctors thingy, yeah, that's a common one here in Macedonia, I think, because in the sugar question as well, they're like, oh, ništa nema da mu vidi. I nije gledat me, but you know what I mean. I had to say it in Macedonian because I didn't think I can I can deliver it correctly in English because it's a Macedonian thing, as I said.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. So the main outtake of this is that we should always strive to be better than generations before. And yeah, baby-led weaning is a relatively new thing here in Macedonia. I mean, not many people have been practicing it for a long time. Maybe like people started practicing it for the last 5 or 6 years. So that's why it wasn't recommended. But I think that parents are enjoying it more, and it's actually a healthier way for children to discover food and not to depend on sugary foods, as you mentioned, because that was the norm here. You just give your kids biscuits or stuff like that, and yeah, they'll be okay. But the problems will come later in life. So I'm glad that things are changing.
Me too, definitely.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to mothers trying to overcome the constant pressure of being the perfect parent and provider?
First of all, what is the perfect parent and provider? And if they exist, please show us. Who are they? Where are they hiding? I think the idea of being the perfect parent looks different for everyone. It's not a fit in the box thing exactly, but these societal and cultural pressures that are put upon mothers and in particular professional working mothers to be this perfect do-it-all person, they're just impossible and sometimes even contradictory of one another. I think this goes on to create a sense of mum guilt, that we've continuously brought up in this discussion, which is, felt by many women and even perpetuates that pressure. My advice is that even though you may not feel it, especially in the beginning as a first-time mum, you're already perfect in your own right. Yes, we have our bad days running on minimal sleep, and from personal experience, I know it's hard in overcoming, some of that anxiety that comes with all of it, and then all of the pressure and those intrusive and negative thoughts which others around you don't feel and they don't see. I think you just need to focus on being a good mum for your little one and focus on your health and well-being as well.
Can you share personal experiences with mom guilt and how you've dealt with it?
So mum guilt for me has really stemmed from some of those societal and cultural expectations, that we've spoken about. And this for me came about since the start of my pregnancy, I'd say right through to birth and postpartum. I felt guilty for having to have an emergency C-section. I felt guilty for physically not being able to breastfeed. I felt guilty for asking family to watch my baby just so I could shower or go out for an hour to catch my breath. I felt guilty for returning to work. I mean, the list just goes on, and I know many mothers out there will relate to this. I think not being able to meet certain expectations put upon you as a woman and as a mother contribute to mum guilt immensely, if not being the root cause. For example, a C-section is seen as the easy way out, which, we know personally it's not true. You have 6 weeks of recovery, you're dealing with so much pain and restricted movement. And then in terms of breastfeeding, I would hear in conversation, young women these days don't breastfeed because they're razgalani, as we say in Macedonian. And the first thing that was asked when my baby was born is, number 1, was it a natural birth? And number 2, is she breastfeeding? 2 experiences I struggled with and felt as a woman as if I had failed, which I did not. My baby is happy, she's healthy, and we are both very lucky to be here, and I'm thankful for that every day. In regards to returning to work, although that wasn't as hard as I thought it would be initially, I still had that guilt of not being with my baby all day and being there to care for her all the time. And with that also came a certain degree of anxiety because I'm not there, I don't see what's happening all the time, even though I know she's safe with my parents, who help look after her. As a mother, you still worry. And this is something I'm still managing, I guess, like many others. But to go back to the second half of your question, the way I dealt with a lot of the mum guilt is by talking to other mums who understand me, such as yourself, and also realizing that at the end of the day, I only have my own expectations to live up to and to set, or rather reset, I should say, and not to those externally. And it's important to be so gentle to yourself and to give yourself time as well.
Okay, so I think we should wrap up the mom part and maybe continue with some questions regarding your cultural heritage. So, as a Macedonian in Australia, could you tell us which generation of Macedonian you represent and how your heritage has influenced your life?
So I am third generation Australian Macedonian. My dedo moved here from Skopje when he was 5 years old, and my baba, who he met and married, immigrated to Melbourne around the age of 21, coming from Veles. Both were, in pursuit of a better life. My baba is a refugee survivor of the Greek Civil War, or as we say in Macedonian, from the Ditsa Begalti. My Macedonian heritage has immensely influenced my life and who I am. I'd say it is part of the core of my identity and my passions in life. I'd say this is especially considering my family's history and background. So I'm very passionate about human rights, women's rights and empowerment, and this influenced me in what I did throughout my university years as well. I'd always used Macedonia, our struggles as a people and a nation, and in particular the genocide committed against Macedonians, specifically in Aegean Macedonia, such as those like my baba, and the women's struggles more broadly, as case studies or examples and as a means of shedding light and increasing awareness on Macedonia and its history. When people ask me, what is your background? I happily tell them and I take pride in it. I say, I'm Macedonian. And I think that this has greatly influenced my life in that sense. I think it's very important to take pride in your heritage and where you come from, no matter where and what that is, and to never shy away from it. This is something I hope to pass down onto my daughter as well. We should rather use this to empower us and educate those around us. And in Australia is a very multicultural society that champions itself on that, despite, its imperfections like all other nations. However, I've always had the space to bring out my roots and diversity here, whether that be at school, university, or at work, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yes, that is actually very nice of you that you're also going to pass your heritage on to your daughter, and the way your parents and grandparents have passed it on to you, especially because you're a third generation and your daughter is going to be, it is fourth generation Macedonian in Australia already. So maybe that is also the motivation that you joined the United Macedonian Diaspora. And can you tell us what kind of work you've been doing with them?
Sure. So I've actually been involved with UMD since I think it's 2018. I first started off as the Australian representative for Generation M, which is a young leaders program, and I'm now on the Australian board, as well as currently I act as the global board secretary. Since my involvement, I've actually always been involved in my local Macedonian community, first of all, whether that be through folk dancing, youth and human rights organisations. However, I was looking to connect with an organisation that was not just about Macedonian matters, but an organisation that really sought to empower Macedonian youth. And this is something I really connected with in terms of UMD. So not only does UMD empower its youth through its various programs, such as Generation M, but it also allows its youth to participate and advocate for and on behalf of the Macedonian diaspora on issues concerning our human rights. So, for example, some of the work that I've been involved in is submitting reports on Macedonia and Macedonian minority human rights to organisations such as the United Nations. I've also helped write letters to the European Union and various political leaders. Most recently, this past summer, I facilitated the panel discussion on women's and youth empowerment in Macedonia and the Balkans more broadly at the first UMD Macedonia Symposium and Experience held in Skopje. So I'm very grateful to UMD for not just what it does, but for really uplifting its youth and women.
Yeah, that was actually a very nice conference that they organized. And in my podcast episode with Emma, she also mentioned that she was the organizer of that. And I think that she mentioned that she'd like to do it again because many great female Macedonian minds came together.
Yeah, I think it's very important to keep connecting and actually make an annual event, which is ultimately the goal.
Have you had the opportunity to visit Macedonia? And if so, what was that experience like for you?
Yes, multiple times. So for the first time, I was about 4 or 5 years old. And the most recent was this past summer where we visited for almost 3 months. But back in 2018, 2019, I actually participated in UMD's Birthright Macedonia program, which aims to bring youth from the diaspora back to the homeland and allows them to experience Macedonia differently as compared to, visiting on a holiday or just simply going to Macedonian vacation. Part of the program is actually also an internship, which allows you to gain professional and work experience within your field of study or interest. And for me, that was government, diaspora, and foreign affairs more broadly. That summer, actually, I also got engaged to my now husband, who is from Macedonia, from Strumica. And I lived in Macedonia for almost 2 years, and during COVID at that. And that for me was one of the most memorable and impactful experience, I think, because it was then that I actually lived as a Macedonian in Macedonia. Believe it or not, when the time came, I actually didn't even want to come back to Australia, which makes a lot of people living there laugh at me in the sense that they say everyone's leaving this country, or why would you want to come back?
Well, it was a different experience for you, so because you've been living in Australia your whole life, so it's understandable that you'd like to stay.
Yes. But when I stayed there, I think when I say that I really lived as a Macedonian, I mean I really lived there as a Macedonian. So with my husband and I lived on that wage, lived, on like the house that his parents built, and it was that whole communal sort of feeling. I also got to spend so much more time with my baba there, so my dad's mom and my cousins, and it was just, I really, really loved it, despite, I think some of the challenges that I faced. But unfortunately I had to finish my master's and come back here. And then we had our daughter and things just fell into place. But yeah, every time we go back to Macedonia, it's very memorable, and we love spending time with our family and friends there. So, and it makes leaving Macedonia every time hard.
But you do come often, so yeah.
Yeah, hopefully again next year, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. How do you keep your Macedonian heritage alive for your children and in your daily life in Australia?
Music is definitely a big one, as well as our Macedonian language and food. Most of the time she actually falls asleep to Macedonian children's songs. She watches Darko Biberko, Zlatno Slaveće, and the rest of them. We also have books in Macedonian. Speaking to her in Macedonian is also a big part of how we keep our heritage alive, I think, and I'd really love for her to be able to speak the language, especially considering that a lot of our immediate family and close family live in Macedonia, so I want her to be able to communicate well with them, but also because I believe language really allows you to connect with any culture on a deeper level, and with people, in fact. And my parents and extended family and friends also play a key role here in speaking to her in Macedonian as well as in English. I think generally speaking, knowing a second or even a third language is just such a benefit and something to really appreciate and value.
Beyond your professional life, what are some of your hobbies or passions that bring balance to your busy schedule?
I think doing things for my community when and where I can, which, at the moment can be very hard at times. But for example, volunteering, with organizations such as UMD and contributing to projects. Otherwise, connecting with my friends and family and going out and being social, I think really helps bring that balance.
Yeah, I agree. So what's the most important lesson you've learned from your experiences as a mother and a professional?
I think there's a lot, but I'd say that our time is so precious. So make sure whatever it is that you're doing, it is meaningful to you.
That's a great advice. And that is a solicited advice. Okay, so because we're wrapping up, is there a message or insight you'd like to share with our audience, especially regarding the intersection of career, motherhood, and cultural heritage?
I think this is such an interesting intersection, but a complex one at that, in that I think there's so much. As we talked about earlier, cultural heritage impacts what motherhood looks like to you and what is expected of you. Women from a Macedonian cultural point of view are also seen as hard workers, And those of us in the diaspora, for example, whose grandparents or parents left their homeland for a better life, generally expect that your daughters and children in general do well in school and build successful careers, because after all, that is why they left Macedonia, for a better life. So there's a high expectation on that in that sense already. But then on the other hand, there's also this pressure to be that perfect housewife or domaćinka, right? At the same time, having everything in order.
Sorry.
I know.
You can go on.
I think that's the issue, because these two expectations contradict each other, especially if you don't have support, for example, hands-on parents, or the finances for for daycare or kindergarten, as we say here, so that you're released to go and work. And within our community, I think some of these struggles are still seen as taboo for women, like the impacts of these expectations on women's mental health, for example, or questioning the men's traditional role in all of that. We don't typically ask a man, how are you balancing work and being a father? Because there's a certain cultural and societal norm that still sees the man as the main breadwinner, even though some women may be earning more. And I think in saying all of this, and as important as it is to share women's experiences and struggles with balancing motherhood in our careers, and therefore empower and support one another, we also need to start changing the conversation. And this has been said for so many years now. But have we really started to see the conversation change? I'm not so sure. And especially within the context of our Macedonian culture, are we even having the conversation? And although I definitely hope to have these conversations with my daughter, I'll also be telling her it's important to look at this intersection positively. So to be proud of her heritage, considering she comes from a strong lineage of Macedonian women, and that she can achieve anything she puts her mind to. But that also being a mother, and a working mother at that, is empowering.
I completely agree. That was a very nice message. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being with us on FEMCAST and sharing your incredible journey, experiences, and insights. I'm truly grateful that I've had you as my guest, and I hope that we can repeat this sometime in the future and maybe talk even deeper on all of these topics.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and for, again, creating such a wonderful platform for us women.
Thank you. See you in the next episode.